So what we're doing today is we're going to clean the chimney and clean the stove of an Osburn 2400 fireplace insert. It'll take between an hour to an hour and a half to do the job complete. We're going to basically clean out the ash that was from the leftover from last year, and we're going to clean out all the creosote out of the chimney, and we're going to make sure that there's no cracks in any of the welds, cracks in anything, no broken fire brick, no damaged refractory material inside. Just general overview, make sure there's nothing out of place. And then we'll re-clean the stove again, put the stove back together. What do you need to clean your chimney? You need a bristle brush. You need some poles, the flexible fiberglass poles to clean it, a good vacuum cleaner, probably a screwdriver and a pair of needle nose pliers will help, and some gloves if you choose to wear gloves. Eyewear if you choose to wear safety goggles and stuff like that, and depending on your breathing conditions, if you want to have a respirator because the dust is very fine particulate. Normally in cleaning a stove, if we're doing this during the season, we normally use an ash vacuum like this. Got a metal hose, solid metal end, metal drum with a fiberglass filter inside here designed for handling ash. It's got a little shaker that you would shake to knock the dust off because the suction of this is not really like the suction of a regular shop vac. The reason we chose a regular shop vac is we can get a lot more done in a quicker period of time for videoing purposes. And we knew that the stove has been off since last year, so we knew there was no risk of a fire, melting the plastic inside, or anything along that line. So normally, like I said, middle of the season, we would be using this if there's any potential possibility of possible hot embers being sucked into this. This stove that we're currently going to clean has not been burned since last year, so everything in there is as dead as the word dead can be for fire. There's no risk of any fire of any kind. There hasn't been a fire lit in the stove for 6-7 months, so we're going to shovel out the ash from last year. I know I should have cleaned it out last year, but I didn't have time. So we're going to shovel out the ash, making the inside of the firebox relatively clean so we can work in a clean environment. I like to be as clean as I possibly can doing this job because you are going to get dirty. You're going to have some dust all over. One thing is about doing this, try to get the shovel to the bottom of the ash pile before you just dump it in there so you don't create a big dust cloud. I take as little apart as possible and examine what I can examine without disturbing it. My thought is the fire brick is protecting the steel behind it. So chances of any of the metal behind the fire brick most likely has no risk of being damaged by the heat of the flame or the embers. It's the steel that's exposed to, unprotected, exposed to the flame, to the heat, that I feel is where there's going to be potentially have a problem. And this I'm going to take outside. I don't want to actually bump it, knock it over, have a problem. Osburn 2400, there's baffles in the top of the stove, and in order to have a clear path from the top of the chimney down, we need to basically remove the baffle plates from the top of the stove and 2 of the secondary burn tubes from the stove, so when we push the brush down, A, we don't damage it, and B, so we don't create a massive amount of pileup of ash and creosote on the top of the baffles, which could be a potential hazard, either a fire hazard or a clogging hazard where it would clog the top of the stove and you wouldn't be able to get your flue gases out the top of your stove. I'm taking out the fire bricks, noting how they're placed, so this way I can gain access to the secondary air tubes at the top of the stove so we can remove the tube's baffle. As being very careful not to break the fire brick because once you heat them, they become fragile. I like the strength of, they're called Welpers. They're welder's helper pliers. I like the strength of the needle nose because they're a much huskier design for pulling the cotter pins. I'm going to straighten the stainless steel cotter pins out, and then I'm going to slide the cotter pins out of their locations that hold the secondary burn tubes in place. And that's what the pins look like. And I'm going to remove 2 of the secondary air tubes. There's 3 total in the stove. I'm removing the secondary burn tubes so I can gain access to the top of the stove, so when we run the chimney brush down the chimney, we can dump all of the ash that comes out of the chimney and creosote that's in the chimney. We can dump all that down inside the firebox, and then we can safely clean it out. So when the pins are out, that allows you to slide the tubes one direction or the other to come off. And then these are your tubes. Man, they made these a good fit, I'll tell you that. Very fragile material that I'm afraid of breaking. And I'm afraid I'm not going to fit it out. No, come on. Man, that is going to be a trick. Now we can get this one out. One good way to mitigate having dust in your house or black soot going into your house from cleaning the creosote from your chimney is we're going to leave the stove door closed, close all the dampers and controls to the stove so nothing can enter the room. We'll let the dust settle, and then we'll clean out the chimney cleanings from the firebox as necessary. First step is undo the hat of the chimney so we can gain access to the flue. Oh, it's bad. Believe it or not, as soon as the brush starts to penetrate, you can immediately see all the creosote and ash just knock itself off the sidewalls. The pipe really doesn't want to have anything stuck to it. You can see a clear difference of it being clean versus dirty. You do have to be cautious to not catch your hand on the sharp edge of the flue liner. Now what we're going to do is we'll go downstairs and we're going to verify that we're at the stove opening. Because right there, I feel like I'm at the stove opening. So we're looking right now to see if the brush is right here, and it is not. So I got to force it further. The reason we're not all the way down is because we're at a bend in the pipe, and that bend in the pipe is preventing us from getting any further. So we're gonna try to force it through and hope to God we make it the rest of the way. We gotta be close. There we go. And now we made it into the firebox, hence the looseness. So we're in there. Now, hopefully we can get out. And we are. Actually, now what we'll do, we'll knock the debris out of the chimney cap. You don't have to make it too tight, strong enough just to stay on, and you're in good shape. So what we're going to do here now is reassemble the stove, but we're going to clean out our ash and creosote from the chimney that we just swept. We're going to remove the door for ease and less chance of damage. Give us a little bit more space to work. Be careful with the door, they're very delicate. It's a ceramic glass. I'm actually probably going to scoop a lot of this out. What we're going to do, we're going to hit our secondary burn tubes with a wire brush. Gently, of course, not to damage them. Just to try and clean them up before we reinstall. I'm doing it here to prevent the dust. Normally I would take them outside and do them, but you can carefully do it in here without any problems. Dust will stay inside your stove. And we'll just vacuum the dust out. This is part of what makes the stove EPA compliant, is this tube. Allows for secondary burn combustion, or the reburning of the gases that are coming off of the wood. Now the actual fun begins. Reassembly without damage. Here we go. And then there is a steel plate that holds that in place. That just rests directly below the flue pipe hole. Now this one's the most fragile because it has the most damage from accidental hits of the fireplace poker and everything else. Now, I hope I can get these plates in. Up. Well, and very, very strongly designed, I gotta say that. I'm very impressed with the quality of build materials in this stove. Ding! Now time to install the tubes. The second tube, or the middle tube, has 32 holes with the smaller holes to match the rear tube in the back that was not removed. And with the cotter pins, you don't need to bend them all the way around in like a pretzel. You can just do a slight bend on them as long as they won't slide out. If you bend them too far, then you won't, A, you run the risk of breaking them, and B, you also run the risk of having more of a difficult time getting them out. Now in a car, it's a little, I go a little bit further than I would go in a situation like this because a car moves down the road, and these cotter pins aren't holding something that's going down the road, so there's less vibration and movement. Though you have expansion and contraction that's involved here, but it's nowhere near what a car goes through during its normal everyday work. And you have to put the side with the cotter pin on first, it appears. So you slip it onto the side with the cotter pin, then you slip it onto the side without the cotter pin. We're locked in. Now, one quick note, I'm reusing the cotter pins in this situation because we don't have replacements. Before this stove will be used, I will be replacing these cotter pins. Not that I'm in fear of them breaking, but the stove manufacturer says it's best to replace. Now we're going to put the fire bricks back in place, and we're going to keep the side that's facing the fire to the side that's facing the fire. So whatever side was facing the fire, we're going to keep it that way. Alrighty, one last quick check before we put the door on. Everything looks safe, secure, and sound. And always inspect your door gasket for damage, because a bad door gasket can cause you to overfire, which can overheat and damage your stove and potentially cause a fire. And make sure your door seals snugly. One good note about ceramic glass is everybody's nervous about the glass breaking. Believe it or not, the glass, they say, I've never tried it, but they say you can actually, with ceramic glass, there's a hot side and a cold side. So when the hot side's hot on the fire side, if you touch it with anything cold, it will break. But they say that ceramic glass, you can actually touch the outside of the glass with something cold, and you do not run the risk of the glass shattering. It's part of this safety feature of the glass itself. But I myself would never touch any glass of any type when the hot side's hot with something cold. And we have a clean stove ready to rock and roll for the winter season.